My Lords, it's a great pleasure to follow my noble friend Lord Vesey of Didcot. Might I say, before I get into my stride, that there has been an email that certain noble lords may have received that emanated a week or so ago from what I call the cold dip wing of the Conservative Party, essentially with the message that those rotters, Vesey and Moylan, are out to spoil our Wizzo's scheme. This is not true in my case. Unlike other speakers who have spoken so far, I declare that I have no interest to declare. I'm not aligned with the food industry, the advertising industry, the broadcasting industry, or indeed any of the charities that wish to restrict, ban or control various foods and drinks. That seemed to cause little upset to the noble Baroness Lady Boycott, who seemed to think that because I could speak in a disinterested fashion, I was somehow precluded from taking part in the debate. But I hope noble lords won't agree that that's the case. I have put my name to a number of amendments in the name of the noble Lord Vesey. I do believe that the ones I have signed up to, which are essentially to do with giving enough time to implement the ban if it is brought into effect, I do hope that they are accepted, and I note that the government has brought forward amendments of a similar character. They improve the bill. They don't go as far as I believe they should. The government's amendments don't go as far as I believe they should. But it's a good sign, and it shows that what we're engaged in here is improving the bill, not trying to destroy it. But I will add a particular word in support of my noble friend's amendment number 247A, which seeks to make the identification of HFSS food a matter that would be subject to parliamentary scrutiny. In effect, what the government is seeking through this schedule is a power to make binding law with all the apparatus of fines and other enforcement by way of mandatory guidance that will not be subject to parliamentary scrutiny. Instead, business planning and investment will always be at the whim of civil servants with no recourse to Parliament. My Lords, that is not a situation that in other circumstances your Lordship's House would feel comfortable with. I think we should apply the same standards here and insist with Amendment 247A that parliamentary approval is required before effectively these punitive measures can be amended. The other amendments in this group in my name cover a wide range of issues, but all of them are aimed at helping business plan for and implement the bans that the government contemplates. But that said, I noted last Friday in the Times that the Times Red Box was reporting a change of heart by the Prime Minister on the whole policy of introducing the advertising and promotions ban. If this is true, we can happily move on and ignore Schedule 17, since all the evidence, including the government's own impact assessment, shows that the policy will, as my noble friend said, have a minuscule effect. The government's own assessment suggests there will be a reduction of fewer than 3 calories a day. So may I ask my noble friend the Minister to confirm when he wraps up whether or not this planned change of policy is in hand. If I could turn to my amendments 247, 250A and 253A in my name, which deal with the question whether the ban applies to brand and advertising and sponsorship, already mentioned by the noble Baroness Lady Boycott and by my noble friend Lord Vesey. This concerns advertising when no product of an unhealthy character is included in the advertisement or sponsorship statement. Putting the brand advertising exemption into the bill is important for businesses which are looking for certainty, as they are already planning advertising campaigns which will run after 2023. The exemption for brand advertising was confirmed at committee stage in the other place when the Minister said products are deemed identifiable if a person could reasonably be expected to identify the advertisements as being for that product. This means that brand advertising is not in scope of the restrictions, as the purpose of the restrictions is to prohibit identifiable products, and he made similar remarks at report stage. This is helpful, but putting the exemption into the bill alongside the list of other exemptions would mean that should the government wish to revisit this exemption in the future, they would be obliged to return to Parliament to set out their reasons for doing so and seek the consent of both Houses. Now, the noble Baroness Lady Boycott, commenting on this, seemed to say, oh, why should we need all that paraphernalia? Let's just trust the government and go with what they say. I almost fell off my bench when I heard her say that. So often in this House we are saying quite the reverse. We are saying let's not trust the government. Let's insist that if we want something to happen, it should be on the face of the bill. So that is all I'm saying. This should be, I believe the government, of course, and in my own small way I do trust the government, but governments change. Let us, if we believe this, let us see the government put it on the face of the bill. And this has been called for by the Delegated Powers and Regulatory Reform and the Constitution Committees, and they have signalled their dissatisfaction that with this way of proceeding. Turning now to Amendments 249A, 252A and 257A in my name, these concern how the government will assess the effectiveness of the ban. I'm assuming, perhaps optimistically, that all noble lords will agree that the restriction on freedom of expression involved in the government's policy should only be continued if it is seen to be effective in its purpose of reducing calorific intake. And indeed that is the government's view, because the bill contains a 5-year review of the effectiveness of the restrictions in line with the better regulation principles. But it is not clear how effectiveness will be judged. The purpose of my amendment is to seek some clarity on the issue now, as we adopt the new rules, so that the effectiveness criteria are not shaped retrospectively in 5 years' time. This needs to be done now in the interests of transparency and to enable the collection of data. It also needs to be done if the industry is to respond by changing its product mix, something which the noble Baroness Lady Boycott said she hoped for and looked forward to, and had said there was evidence of their having done in advance. But unless they understand in advance what the criteria are by which the ban will be judged effective, how can they possibly begin the process of changing the product mix to meet those criteria? So I would like the lack of the impact of the ban is clear, but the criteria for judging how it will be assessed effectively need to be addressed right at the outset. There's also the question of what the government will take into account in assessing those criteria. The policy itself, the government's own impact assessment, envisages that the policy will likely reduce calorie consumption by around 3 calories a day. 3 calories a day is roughly equivalent to half a gram of butter, or 1/500th of a standard pack of butter. This is so small as to be insignificant in terms of health benefits. Yet the policy will undoubtedly have wider economic benefits, including on competition, innovation, prices, media revenues, advertising, and the wider creative industries. Is the government going to assess this wider picture? There are also particular effects on certain industries. For example, I learnt the other day, I shouldn't have been surprised about this, but I learnt the other day that 90% of pizzas are now sold online, from which presumably their advertising is going to be banned. Where in the government's calculation of the effects of the total and I would say disproportionate ban on advertising HFSS online is its effect on investment and employment in this sector. Will they be taking account of lost jobs and opportunities that could arise? For example, will the government decide that the rules are effective based on a reduction in the amount of HFSS advertising that children see, or will they be looking at whether they lead to a decline in childhood obesity? If so, how will they evaluate the impact of the advertising bans as opposed to other measures being taken? Again, business needs to know now in order to plan and invest. Now, next, my Amendment 267A would introduce a sunset clause so that should the restrictions be ineffective, they would not continue indefinitely. There is no value in keeping rules in place if they are not fulfilling the purpose for which they were intended. That would just be bad lawmaking. Again, the noble Baroness, Lady Boycott, says it's a bit unprecedented to have such an excellent measure attached to a new set of regulations, but we're free of the European Union now, and sunset clauses should be standard measures when we regulate something for the first time if it turns out to be ineffective. Amendments 248 and 251 in my name address an anomaly in the proposed advertising regulations regarding the food products that are within their scope. A daily serving of nuts has been found to reduce heart disease risk by 20%, and so products made from nuts sold in bags are quite reasonably outside the scope of these proposed new restrictions. Yet the same products in bar form are in scope. But, my lords, the shape of a food is not a nutritional consideration. The proposed scope is inconsistent with well-established public health policies on foods that are beneficial to include in the diet, and the regulations are internally consistent. I ask my noble friend to review these inconsistencies and ensure that the new advertising restrictions support consumers in making healthier choices and incentivise food manufacturers to make the right kinds of products. Similarly, with Amendment 248A in my name, this relates to high-protein bars. It is already the case under EU regulations still in force in the United Kingdom that a claim that a food is low in sugars may only be made where the product contains no more than 5 grams of sugars per 100 grams for solids, or 2.5 grams of sugars per 100 ml for liquids. And a claim that a food is high in protein may only be made where at least 20% of the energy value of the food is provided in protein. There are small businesses, one has approached me, who have carefully crafted their product to meet these regulations. They meet these regulations, and that puts them in the category of good and healthy food, because that's what the purpose of those regulations were. And yet their protein bars, high protein, low sugar bars, that have been operating perfectly lawfully until now, will fail to meet the government's new regulations as they stand, and their advertising will come to an end. I ask my noble friend what assurance he can give them that their legitimate business is not in effect to be criminalised by this bill.